3 weeks had passed since the Great Misunderstanding, and the Aldery Medical Bay had been transformed into a joint research facility. Where once there had been weapons and containment fields, now there were collaborative workstations where humans and Aldery worked side by side to understand each other's biology. Captain Jake Morrison stood watching as Ensign Tommy Lee demonstrated human healing for a group of fascinated Aldery scientists. Tommy had volunteered to get a small cut on his finger, and now the aliens were watching in amazement as his blood clotted and the wound began to close. The automatic repair system activates immediately, Dr. Kethra explained to her students. Her scales now a bright blue color that Jake had learned meant excitement and wonder. The liquid carries specialized repair cells to the damaged site, and the tissue begins reconstructing itself without any conscious input from the host. It's like having millions of tiny engineers working inside your body, Velox added, his voice full of admiration. They know exactly what to do and how to fix problems. Tommy grinned as he watched the tiny cut disappear. Yeah, and I don't even have to think about it. Pretty cool, right? The young Aldery scientists clicked and hummed among themselves. There. Musical language creating harmonies that Nina Martinez's improved translation system converted into expressions of awe and fascination. Dr. Kethra, one of the students asked, how do they coordinate so many automatic systems without creating conflicts? That's the beauty of random evolution, Dr. Kethra replied. Over millions of years, only the systems that worked well together survived. The incompatible combinations died out, leaving behind these perfectly integrated biological machines. Jake smiled at how much the Aldery's perspective had changed. What they had once seen as parasitic infection, they now recognized as the most sophisticated biological engineering in the known galaxy. Admiral Vexara approached Jake, her massive form moving with surprising grace. Captain Morrison, I have received responses from the Aldery Science Council regarding our joint research. Good news, I hope? Very good news. They are authorizing the construction of a permanent research station to study human biology and what they are calling random evolution theory. They believe your species may hold the key to developing new medical technologies. Jake nodded, pleased but not entirely surprised. Over the past 3 weeks, the Aldery had discovered that human biological systems could solve problems that their crystal-based technology couldn't handle. Human blood's ability to carry multiple types of cargo simultaneously had inspired new transportation designs. The human immune system's ability to recognize and fight unknown threats had revolutionized their computer security systems. There's more, Admiral Vexar continued. The Council has approved contact with your Earth government. We want to establish formal diplomatic relations and scientific exchanges. That's wonderful news, Jake said. Though I should warn you, humans come in many different varieties. Not everyone looks like my crew. Different varieties? Dr. Kethra looked up from her demonstration. You mean there are subspecies of humans? Not subspecies exactly, but different ethnic groups with slightly different characteristics. Different. Skin colors, facial features, body types. The Aldery students began clicking excitedly among themselves. More biological diversity to study, Velox translated their conversation. They're very eager to meet more humans. Dr. Brooks was working at another station with a team of Aldery engineers, using human cardiovascular principles to design better fluid systems for their ships. Captain, you should see what we've accomplished. The Aldery have developed artificial blood vessels that can self-repair and adapt to changing conditions. And we've learned to create crystal matrices that can process multiple types of information simultaneously, Dr. Kethra added, by combining our harmonic systems with human electrical principles. Jake walked over to examine their work. The new hybrid technologies were impressive, but what struck him most was how well the two species were working together. The initial fear and misunderstanding had given way to mutual respect and genuine friendship. Dr. Kethra, Jake said, can I ask you something? When you first saw Ben on the examination table, what exactly did you think was happening? Dr. Kethra's scales shifted to a pale green that Jake now knew meant embarrassment. We thought he was being consumed from the inside by some kind of aggressive parasitic organism. The movement patterns looked like something trying to take control of his body and the reproductive area. We believed it was the primary parasite preparing to emerge and infect other hosts, she admitted. In our worst projections, we estimated that the entire human species would be dead within a generation. Ben, who was helping with another demonstration nearby, laughed when he heard this. So you guys were trying to save us from ourselves? Exactly, Admiral Vexara said. We were prepared to destroy your entire crew to prevent the spread of what we thought was a galaxy-threatening plague. Instead, you discovered that humans are basically biological miracles, Dr. Brooks said with a grin. More than miracles, Dr. Kethra corrected. Humans represent proof that random evolution can produce results that exceed even the most sophisticated intelligent design. Your species has inspired us to reconsider our entire understanding of biology and evolution. Jake received a communication from his ship's bridge. Captain, we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command. Put it through. The holographic display activated, showing Admiral Patricia Williams, Jake's superior at Earth Command. Captain Morrison, we've received some very interesting reports from your mission. Something about humans being biological marvels? It's a long story, Admiral, but yes. The Alderi are amazed by human biology. They want to establish formal diplomatic relations and scientific exchanges. Well, that's certainly not what we expected when we sent you on a first contact mission, Admiral Williams said with a smile. But I suppose discovering that humans are apparently the most sophisticated biological organisms in the galaxy isn't the worst outcome. There's more, ma'am. The Alderi have technology that could revolutionize human medicine. They can repair damaged tissue using harmonic resonance, and their crystal-based systems never wear out or break down. Fascinating. Captain, I'm authorizing you to negotiate a preliminary agreement with the Alderi. Earth is very interested in what they have to offer. After the communication ended, Jake looked around the bustling research facility. Humans and Alderi were sharing knowledge, laughing together, and building technologies that neither species could have developed alone. You know, he said to Dr. Kethra, this whole thing started because you thought there was a serpent in Ben's underwear. Dr. Kethra's scales turned bright yellow with what Jake had learned was the Alderi equivalent of laughter. Yes, and that serpent has led to the greatest scientific collaboration in galactic history. Speaking of which, Ben called out from across the room, I just got word that 3 more alien species have requested meetings with humans. Apparently, word is spreading about our miraculous serpentine biology systems. Jake shook his head in amazement. I guess being misunderstood isn't always a bad thing. No, Dr. Kethra agreed. Sometimes it's the beginning of something wonderful. The moment Dr. Kethra lay down on the human examination table, Jake knew they were about to discover something that would change everything. The human medical scanner that Dr. Brooks had brought from their ship looked primitive compared to the Alderi technology, but it was designed to examine carbon-based life forms with soft tissue. This feels very strange, Dr. Kethra said, her scales shifting to a nervous purple color. Our examination tables are made of living crystal that interfaces directly with our biological matrix. Dr. Brooks adjusted the scanner settings and began the examination. Just relax. This won't hurt at all. The first images appeared on the display screen, and Jake heard several humans gasp in amazement. Where Dr. Kethra's scales met her body, there was no flesh underneath. Instead, there were crystalline structures that seemed to grow directly from some kind of internal framework. Fascinating, Dr. Brooks murmured. Your entire body is made of interconnected crystal formations. No soft tissue at all. Of course not, Dr. Kethra said, sounding confused. Soft tissue will be too weak to support a complex organism. Our crystal matrix provides both structure and function. Jake watched as the scanner revealed more of Alderi biology Instead of organs, Dr. Kethra had geometric chambers that seemed to process materials through direct chemical reactions. Instead of blood vessels, she had channels carved directly into her crystal bones that moved nutrients through capillary action. "There's no circulatory system at all," Dr. Brooks announced to the room. "No heart, no blood, no flowing liquids anywhere in her body." "Why would we need flowing liquids?" Velox asked. "That seems very inefficient and messy." "And there's no electrical nervous system," Dr. Brooks continued, studying the readings. "How do you think it moves?" "Through harmonic resonance," Dr. Kethra explained. "Our crystal matrix vibrates at different frequencies to transmit information and coordinate movement." Jake felt his understanding of the universe shift. The Alteri weren't just different from humans. They were based on completely opposite biological principles. Where humans were soft and flowing, Alteri were hard and structured. Where humans used electricity and chemistry, Alteri used vibration and resonance. "So when you saw our blood vessels moving," Jake said slowly, "it really did look like parasites to you because you've never seen anything like internal fluid systems before." "Exactly," Admiral Dexara said. "In our experience, only parasitic. Organisms move freely within a host body. Everything else should be fixed in place." Dr. Brooks was examining the neural pathways in Dr. Kethra's head. "This is incredible. Instead of neurons, you have crystal fibers that transmit information through sound waves." "Sound waves?" Communications Officer Nina Martinez had been quietly working on improving the translation system, and suddenly she looked up with excitement. "Dr. Kethra, when you think, do you hear music?" "Music?" Dr. Kethra seemed confused by the question. "I hear the harmonies of thought. Yes. Different ideas create different frequencies." "Does your species not experience thought song?" "No, our thoughts are electrical patterns," Nina explained. "But I think I understand now why our translator keeps having problems. Your language isn't just words, it's musical patterns. Jake, watch." As Nina began adjusting her equipment based on this new understanding. Within minutes, the translation between the two species became much clearer and more accurate. "The clarity is remarkable," Dr. Kethra said, and Jake could hear the difference in her translated voice. It sounded more natural, with emotional undertones that had been missing before. "Now that we can communicate better," Jake said, "maybe we can solve the original problem." Dr. Brooks had Ben move around while both species watched the scanner displays. With better translation, he could explain exactly what was happening inside Ben's body as blood flowed to different areas and muscles contracted and relaxed. "Liquid system responds to the electrical commands from the brain," Dr. Kethra observed. "When he decides to move his arm, the neural electricity signals the muscle tissue, which requires more nutrients, so the blood flow increases to that area." "Right," Dr. Brooks said. "Everything is connected and coordinated. And the large serpent in his reproductive area?" Velox asked, still sounding nervous. Ben's face turned red again, but Dr. Brooks handled the explanation professionally. "That's a normal male anatomical response. Increased blood flow to reproductive organs happens automatically under certain conditions." "Automatic?" Admiral Dexara sounded fascinated. "Your bodies function without conscious control?" "Most of our biology is automatic," Jake explained. "Breathing, heartbeat, digestion, temperature regulation. We don't have to think about it." "Remarkable," Dr. Kethra said. "Our bodies require constant harmonic input to maintain all functions. We must consciously regulate every biological process." Jake realized this explained why the Alteri had been so confused. In their experience, everything inside a living body should be under direct conscious control. The idea of automatic biological functions was as foreign to them as crystal-based biology was to humans. "So you have to think about breathing?" Dr. Brooks asked. "Of course. And nutrient distribution, waste processing, temperature management, everything." Dr. Kethra sounded surprised that this wasn't obvious. How do you maintain biological balance if you're not consciously controlling it? Evolution, Jake said. Our bodies learned to regulate themselves over millions of years so our brains could focus on other things. Evolution, Admiral Dexar repeated thoughtfully. You keep using that word. In our understanding, evolution is guided by conscious decision. Organisms choose to adapt in specific ways. Conscious evolution? Dr. Brooks looked stunned. Your species directed its own genetic development? All intelligent species do this, Dr. Kethra said. When our ancestors decided they needed stronger bodies, they modified their crystal matrix to be more durable. When they needed better thinking abilities, they refined their harmonic resonance systems. Jake felt another shift in his understanding. The Alderi hadn't just evolved differently from humans. They had actively controlled their evolution through conscious choice and biological engineering. No wonder they couldn't believe that human complexity had developed naturally. Our evolution was random, Jake explained. Natural selection, genetic mutations, survival of the fittest. It took millions of years and billions of attempts to produce modern humans. Random? The horror in Admiral Dexar's voice was clear even through the translator. You allow random changes to your genetic structure? We didn't allow it. It just happened. That's how evolution works for most species on our planet. Most species? Dr. Kethra was examining the human scanner readings again. You mean there are other organisms on your world with these complex automatic systems? Millions? Of species? Dr. Brooks said. Fish with gills, birds with hollow bones, insects with compound eyes. All developed through random evolution over billions of years. The Alderi were silent for a long moment, processing this information. If this is true, Admiral Dexara said finally, then your planet represents a completely unique form of biological development. Random evolution producing such complexity should be impossible. But it's not impossible, Jake said. It's just unlikely, and that's what makes it so amazing. The quarantine protocols have been in effect for 6 hours now, and Jake could see the fear spreading through the Alderi crew like wildfire. Every human on the New Horizon had been confined to their quarters while teams of alien scientists worked frantically to understand what they believed was a parasitic plague threatening their ship. Dr. Kethra had not left the medical bay since the initial incident. Her scales had shifted through every color Jake had seen, from the deep red of fear to a sickly yellow that he was learning meant confusion. She kept running scans on Ben, who was still trapped in the containment field, and each new reading seemed to disturb her more than the last. The parasitic activity is beyond anything in our databases, she announced to Admiral Dexara, who had stationed herself permanently in the medical bay. These organisms have completely integrated themselves into every system of the host body. They control circulation, waste removal, even neural activity. Neural activity? The Admiral's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You mean these parasites control their minds? Jake felt his stomach drop. No, that's not what she means. Dr. Kethra, our nervous system isn't parasitic. It's how our brains communicate with the rest of our bodies. Your brains? Dr. Kethra stared at him with those huge yellow eyes. You have multiple brains? No, just one brain, but it sends signals through nerves to control our muscles and organs. The nerves are like wires carrying electrical messages. Velox made a sound that the translator interpreted as horrified gasping. Electrical activity in living tissue? That should kill you instantly. It doesn't kill us. It keeps us alive. Doctor. Brooks explained patiently. Our entire nervous system runs on electrical impulses. It's how we think, move, and feel. The Alderi science team exchanged looks of pure terror. Jake was beginning to realize that their species must have evolved with completely different biological systems. Where humans use electricity and chemistry, the Alderi apparently use something else entirely. Show me your hand, Dr. Kethra said to Jake suddenly. Jake hesitated, then slowly extended his hand toward her scanner. The device hummed as it examined his palm and fingers. "Impossible," she whispered. "The electrical activity is constant. There are thousands of individual serpentine organisms throughout just this small appendage. And they're all coordinated, working together. Those are nerve fibers," Jake said. "They let me feel things and control my fingers." To demonstrate, he wiggled his fingers. Every aldery in the room took a step backward. The parasites responded to the host's mental commands. Dr. Kethra reported, "This level of integration suggests a symbiotic relationship that has existed for thousands of years." "Millions of years," Dr. Brooks corrected. "Humans evolved this way naturally." "Evolution doesn't work like that," Admiral Vexara said firmly. "Complex parasitic relationships require careful bioengineering. Your species must have been modified by an advanced civilization." Jake realized they were dealing with a fundamental difference in how the two species understood biology. The aldery couldn't conceive of soft tissue and internal systems, developing naturally because their own evolution had taken a completely different path. Engineer Carlos Rodriguez had been listening to the conversation through the communication system, and finally Jake heard his voice over the intercom. "Captain, request permission to join the medical examination." "Absolutely not," Admiral Dexara said immediately. "We will not expose more of our crew to potential infection." "Ma'am, with respect, I think I can help explain what you're seeing," Carlos said. "I'm an engineer. Maybe I can describe human biology in terms you'll understand better." Dr. Kethra looked intrigued despite her fear. "What do you mean?" "Well, you keep calling our blood vessels serpents, but they're really more like pipes in a building. Our heart is like a pump that moves liquid through the pipes to deliver what each room needs." "Pipes?" Dr. Kethra tilted her head. "You mean constructed channels?" "Not constructed, grown. But they serve the same purpose. Our blood vessels are like a transportation network throughout our bodies." Jake could see Dr. Kethra processing this information. Her scales shifted to a lighter green, which he hoped meant she was becoming less afraid and more curious. "And the electrical activity?" she asked. "Like wiring in a computer," Carlos continued. "Our brain is the central processor, and our nerves are the wires that carry signals to all the different components. A biological computer?" Vlok sounded fascinated now instead of terrified. "With integrated liquid cooling and waste management systems?" "Exactly," Dr. Brooks said, catching on to Carlos's approach. "Humans are essentially biological machines that maintain and repair themselves." Admiral Vexar was quiet for a long moment. "If this is true, then your species represents the most sophisticated bioengineering we have ever encountered." "Who created you?" "Nobody created us," Jake said. "We evolved naturally over millions of years." "Natural evolution cannot produce such complexity," Dr. Kethra insisted. "The coordination required between all these systems is beyond the capability of random genetic changes." "But it did happen," Dr. Brooks said. "And we're not the only species on our planet with similar systems. Most animals on Earth have circulatory systems, nervous systems, and soft tissue." "Most animals?" Admiral Vexar looked stunned. "You mean there are other species with these parasitic relationships?" "They're not parasitic," Jake said again. But he was starting to realize that the aldery simply couldn't understand the concept of integrated biological systems. Dr. Kethra was running more detailed scans now, and Jake could see the readings on her displays. The images showed his circulatory system in incredible detail, with blood flowing through arteries and veins like a complex river system. "Look at this," she said to her team. "The liquid transportation network branches into smaller and smaller channels, reaching every cell in the organism. It's more efficient than any engineering system we've ever designed. And look at the neural network," Vlogs added, pointing to another display. "The electrical pathways are so complex, they make our best communication systems look primitive." Jake realized that the aldery's fear was slowly being replaced by professional admiration. As scientists and engineers, they were beginning to appreciate the complexity of human biology, even if they didn't understand how it could have evolved naturally. Dr. Kethera, Jake said carefully, would you be willing to let us examine one of your people? Maybe if we understand how Alderi biology works, we can better explain how human biology works. The medical bay went completely silent. Every Alderi stopped moving and stared at Jake with expressions he couldn't read. You want to study us? Admiral Vexar asked slowly. Just like you're studying us. Scientific exchange goes both ways, right? Dr. Kethera's scales shifted through several colors rapidly. We ... We have never allowed alien species to examine our biology. We've never allowed it either, Jake pointed out. But here we are. The risk ... Dr. Kethera began. Is the same for both of us, Dr. Brooks added. If you want to understand our biology, maybe we need to understand yours first. Jake could see the Alderi having a rapid discussion in their own language, too fast for the translator to follow. Finally, Admiral Vexara turned back to them. Dr. Kethera will submit to basic scans only, she said. But any sign of parasitic infection in our crew, and this exchange ends immediately. Agreed, Jake said, hoping that seeing Alderi biology would help both species understand each other better. He had no idea how wrong he was about to be. The containment field around Ben's examination table hummed with a low blue energy that made the air taste metallic. Jake watched as more Alderi security forces poured into the medical bay, their weapons charged and ready. The situation had gone from friendly scientific exchange to potential interstellar incident in less than 5 minutes. Dr. Kethera stood behind a protective barrier, her scales now a deep red color that Jake was learning meant extreme agitation. She kept looking at her scanner readings and shaking her head in disbelief. The parasitic activity is spreading throughout the specimen, she announced to her team. I am detecting serpentine movement in his chest cavity, his limbs, even his head region. Those aren't parasites, Jake said for the 10th time, but his voice was getting drowned out by the increasing chaos in the room. More alarms had joined. The first one, creating a symphony of warning sounds that made it hard to think. Lisa Park was still working frantically on her translation device, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool temperature of the alien ship. Captain, I think I'm making progress, but their medical database is completely incompatible with human biology. It's like trying to explain color to someone who was born blind. Ben was sitting on the examination table looking increasingly uncomfortable, both from the situation and from being nearly naked in front of so many armed aliens. Hey, can someone get me my clothes back? This is really awkward. Do not let the infected specimen access any materials, Dr. Kethera ordered. The parasites might use clothing or equipment to spread to other hosts. We're not infected, Jake protested. This is just how human bodies work. Admiral Vexara entered the medical bay, her massive form making the other Alderi look small by comparison. Her scales were almost black, and she wore what appeared to be ceremonial armor covered in glowing symbols. When she spoke, her voice was so deep that Jake felt it in his chest. Dr. Kethera, what is the status of this biological threat? Admiral, the humans appear to be infested with multiple parasitic organisms that control their biological functions. The parasites are highly active and respond to stress. I recommend immediate quarantine of all human specimens until we can determine if they pose a threat to our ship. Jake felt his heart sink. Admiral, please listen to me. We're not infected with anything. Human bodies just work differently than yours. What you're seeing on your scanners is normal biological activity. Admiral Dexara studied him with eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. You claim these serpents are normal for your species? They're not serpents, Jake said, trying to keep his voice calm. They're blood vessels, tubes that carry nutrients throughout our bodies. Every human has them. Every human? Dr. Kethera's voice went up several octaves. You mean your entire species is infected? Not infected. Evolved. This is how we developed over millions of years. The Aldari began clicking and hissing among themselves at a rapid pace. Jake could tell they were debating something important, but the translator couldn't keep up with their rapid conversation. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Ryan Brooks had been trying to get into the medical bay for the past 10 minutes, but the security forces wouldn't let him pass. Finally, he managed to push through the crowd of aliens. "Captain, what's going on?" "Half the ship thinks we're under biological attack. The Aldari think we're infected with parasites," Jake explained quickly. "Their scanners are picking up our circulatory system, and they don't understand what they're seeing." Dr. Brooks looked at the containment field around Ben and the weapons pointed at them. "Oh no, they don't have internal circulation like we do they?" "Apparently not." Dr. Brooks stepped forward and addressed Dr. Kethra directly. "Doctor, I'm the Chief Medical Officer for the human crew. May I explain what you're seeing on your scanners?" "Stay back," Velox warned, raising his weapon. "The infection might be spread through breath or skin contact." "There's no infection," Dr. Brooks said patiently. "What you're detecting is our cardiovascular system. Blood flows through vessels throughout our bodies to deliver oxygen and nutrients to our organs." "Blood?" Dr. Kethra tilted her head. "What is blood?" Dr. Brooks blinked in surprise. It's a liquid that carries everything our cells need to survive. Red blood cells carry oxygen. White blood cells fight disease. Platelets help with healing. It flows through arteries and veins powered by our heart. A liquid flows through your body powered by an organ? Admiral Dexara sounded horrified. "And you claim this is natural?" "Yes, completely natural." "How do your bodies transport nutrients?" "Through crystalline matrices within our exoskeleton," Dr. Kethra explained. "Nutrients are absorbed directly through specialized scales and distributed through solid pathways. We have no need for internal liquids or moving parts." Jake was beginning to understand the scope of the misunderstanding. The Aldari had evolved completely differently from humans. Where humans had soft, flexible bodies with complex internal systems, the Aldari were essentially living crystal structures with simple, direct biological processes. Communications Officer Nina Martinez had managed to work her way into the medical bay and was setting up her own translation equipment. "Captain, I've been monitoring their communications. They're debating whether to jettison our entire crew into space to prevent contamination of their ship." "That's not going to happen," Jake said firmly, but he was starting to worry. The Aldari clearly saw humans as some kind of biological weapon or disease, rather than a natural life form. "The serpentine organisms are becoming more active," Velox reported, studying his scanner. "The large one in the reproductive area is showing increased blood flow and physical response." Ben groaned and covered his face with his hands. "Oh, come on, not now. What is happening?" Dr. Kethra demanded. "Is the primary parasite preparing to emerge?" "It's not a parasite, Doctor," Brooks said desperately. "It's a normal biological response. Human males have. That is, when blood flows to certain areas." The translator made several error sounds and gave up trying to convert Dr. Brooks' explanation. The Aldari medical team looked at each other in confusion and growing fear. "The specimen appears to be in distress," one of the technicians reported. "Should we attempt to extract the primary organism before it causes internal damage?" "No!" Jake and Dr. Brooks shouted at the same time. "Do not touch him," Dr. Brooks continued. "You could seriously injure him if you don't understand human anatomy." Admiral Dexara was consulting with her security chief, their voices too low for the translator to pick up. Jake could see other Aldari crew members gathering outside the medical bay, all of them looking frightened and confused. "Admiral," Jake said, "I know this looks strange to you, but humans and Aldari just evolved differently. We're not diseased or infected. We're just built differently than you are." "Built differently?" Dr. Kethra repeated. "You mean these serpentine parasites are actually part of your natural structure?" "Yes, exactly. What you're calling serpents are just our blood vessels, nerves, and organs. they're supposed to move and be active. That's how we stay alive. This is unprecedented, Admiral Vexara said slowly. We have never encountered a species with such complex internal parasitic relationships. They're not parasites, Jake insisted, but he could see he wasn't making progress. Dr. Kethra was studying her readings again. If these organisms are truly part of your natural biology, then your species represents a completely unknown form of life. Symbiotic relationships with this complexity should not be possible. Maybe impossible isn't the right word, Lisa Park said, finally looking up from her translation work. Maybe it's just miraculous. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the medical bay of the alien ship and tried not to look nervous. The walls were made of some kind of blue crystal that seemed to glow from inside. Strange machines with too many arms hung from the ceiling like metal. Spiders. Everything smelled like ozone and something that reminded him of old pennies. This is really happening, he said to himself. 3 months ago, his ship, the New Horizon, had been doing a routine survey mission near the edge of human space. Now he was standing inside an alien vessel, about to let creatures from another world examine his crew. The Aldery had made contact 2 weeks ago, and both sides were eager to learn about each other. Dr. Kethra clicked her claws against her tablet as she read through the translation device. She was tall and thin, covered in scales that change. Color from green to blue, depending on how the light hit them. Her eyes were large and yellow, with pupils that were just thin slits. When she spoke, her voice came out as clicks and hisses, but the translator made it sound like a woman with a slight accent. We are very excited to study human biology, Dr. Kethra said. Your species is so different from ours. We have never seen beings with soft skin before. Jake nodded and smiled. We're just as curious about you. This could be the start of something amazing for both our peoples. The other Aldery in the room moved around on 4 legs instead of 2. They wore no clothes, since their scales provided natural protection. Jake had been told that showing skin was actually a sign of trust in their culture, since it meant you had no armor or weapons. Lieutenant Ben Carter walked into the medical bay and looked around with wide eyes. He was young and eager, the kind of person who volunteered for everything without thinking too hard about it. So, Doc, what exactly are you going to do to me? Dr. Ketra's assistant, a smaller Aldery named Velox, held up a device that looked like a crystal wand. We will use our bioscanners to study your internal structure. It is completely safe. We just want to understand how your bodies work. Ben shrugged and started to remove his uniform jacket. Sounds good to me. Science is science, right? Jake watched as his crew member stripped down to his underwear and lay on the examination table. The table was made of the same glowing crystal as the walls, and it felt warm to the touch. Ben seemed relaxed, joking with the medical team through the translator. Your skin is so strange, Velox said, running the scanner over Ben's arm. It moves and changes. How do you make it do that? Ben flexed his bicep. It's just muscle under. There, nothing fancy. The Aldery medical team gathered around the scanner display, clicking and hissing to each other in their own language. Jake could see confusion on their faces, if he was reading their expressions right. It was hard to tell with beings who had no eyebrows or facial hair. Dr. Kethra adjusted some controls on the scanner and frowned. We are detecting movement inside your body. Many things are moving. Is this normal? Yeah, that's just my heart. Beating and blood flowing around, Ben said. Plus breathing and all that stuff. Your bodies do the same thing, right? The Aldery exchanged looks. Their translator was having trouble with medical terms, making strange beeping sounds whenever. Ben tried to explain human biology. Blood flowing? Dr. Kethra asked. You mean liquid moves through your body? Sure. Blood carries oxygen and nutrients to all my organs. It flows through tubes called blood vessels. Velox nearly dropped his scanner. Tubes? There are tubes inside. You? Well, yeah. Arteries and veins. They're like highways for blood cells. The medical team started clicking much faster now, and Jake could tell they were getting upset about something. He stepped closer to the examination table. "Is everything okay?" Jake asked. Dr. Kethra looked at him with those big yellow eyes. "Captain, we are detecting multiple serpentine structures moving inside your crew member's body. They appear to be alive and quite active." "Serpentine?" Jake was confused for a moment. "Oh, you mean blood vessels. They're not serpents, they're just tubes that carry blood. The scanner shows them moving and riding like living creatures," Vlock said, his voice getting higher. "And there are so many of them." Ben tried to sit up on the table. "Hey, what's the big deal? It's just normal human stuff." That's when things went really wrong. Ben shifted his position on the table, and his underwear moved with him. The Aldery bioscanner was still running, and suddenly Vlox let out a sound that was part scream and part hiss. "Serpent!" Vlox shouted, pointing at Ben's midsection. There was a large serpent moving between his legs. Every Aldery in the room froze. Dr. Kethra stared at the scanner display with her mouth open, showing rows of sharp teeth. Alarms started going off all around the medical bay. "What? No, that's not a serpent," Ben said, looking down at himself. "That's just ... Oh man, this is embarrassing." Jake realized what was happening and felt his face turn red. "Dr. Kethra, I can explain. It's not what you think." But the Aldery weren't listening. Vlox was backing away from the examination table while making panicked noises. Dr. Kethra was shouting orders in her own language. Red lights started flashing on the walls. "Biological contamination alert," came a voice over the ship's communication system. "All personnel to emergency stations." More Aldery rushed into the medical bay, all of them armed with weapons that glowed the same blue as the walls. They surrounded Ben, who was still lying on the table in his underwear, looking more confused than scared. "Everyone stay calm," Jake said, raising his hands. "There's no contamination. This is just a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Dr. Kethra snapped. "Our scanners show that your crew member is infested with parasitic organisms. They are moving throughout his entire body. And there is a large one in his reproductive area that appears to be very active." "It's not a parasite," Jake tried to explain. "Humans just have different anatomy than you do." "Different?" Vlox was still pointing his weapon at Ben. "You call harboring serpents inside your body different. What kind of beings are you?" Jake could see that his diplomatic officer, Lisa Park, had just entered the medical bay. She took one look at the situation and immediately started working on her translation device. "Captain," she said quietly, "I think we have a serious communication problem." "You think?" Jake muttered. Dr. Kethra was studying her scanner readings again. "The serpent activity is increasing. It appears to be responding to stress. This confirms our fears that these are parasitic control organisms." "They're not parasites," Ben said, sitting up despite the weapons pointed at him. "Look, this is really awkward, but that's just my ... Don't move," Dr. Kethra ordered. "The serpent might be preparing to attack or reproduce." Jake watched as more Aldery filled the room. Some wore what looked like hazmat suits made of the same crystal material as everything else. They were setting up containment fields around Ben's examination table. "This is getting out of hand," Jake said to Lisa. "Can you fix the translator?" Lisa was frantically working on her device. "I'm trying, but it keeps crashing when I input human biological terms. I think their database doesn't have any reference for mammalian anatomy." The situation was spiraling out of control, and Jake knew they needed to find a way to explain human biology before the Aldery decided his crew was too dangerous to keep alive. The problem was, how do you explain something as basic as blood circulation to beings who apparently had completely different internal systems? Dr. Kethra looked at him with what he hoped was scientific curiosity rather than fear. "Captain Morrison, we need to understand what we are dealing with. Are your people infected with these serpentine parasites, or are you actually symbiotic organisms?" Jake took a deep breath. This was going to be a very long day.